order the Committee of the Whole for the City Council of Highland Park, Illinois. The date is December 16, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Bruckman.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Tapia.
Present.
Councilmember Littlewer.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Here.
Mayor Rotering.
Here, for purposes of establishing identity, Councilmember Tapia, what is the best sport in the world?
Football.
And that's spelled F-U-T-B-O-L, right?
Got it. Yes.
Thank you. I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. We do have a quorum, and may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole that we held November 25th, 2024?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And may I have approval of the minutes of the closed session of the regular Committee of the Whole meeting held November 25, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. The minutes are approved. Our first item of scheduled business for the Committee of the Whole is the Highland Park Community Foundation 2024 Annual Report. We're so delighted to welcome you. And who wants to speak? Everybody, all together now? While you get that sorted out.
If you just make sure.
I'm just gonna say thank you to the Highland Park Community Foundation for the amazing work that you do. It goes without saying that our community is just that much stronger and that much more supported, especially our most vulnerable members of our community, because of the hard work that you do, and we appreciate it. So thank you for coming by and sharing some updates with us.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city manager. Thank you for inviting us tonight. I'm Lori Levin, Chair of the Highland Park Community Foundation. With me are Eric Ephraim, our Vice Chair, Terry Olean, our Executive Director. We are very excited to provide you an update on our 2024 grant funding and share a few additional updates about the Foundation's impact this year. As you'll hear, it's been another year of meaningful progress for the Foundation, and we're grateful for our continued partnership with the city that helps us support and strengthen our community. Eric?
How do I advance the slide?
Okay, I think what we did.
So is it technical? Perfect. So I'll just talk a little bit about our grant process, and no real changes to how we do this. Our grant season is about 9 months long, so we start in January with a kickoff. We go through all the documents, make sure that we've got the process set for the year. During the spring, we get interim reports from the grants that we received the prior year, just check up on those previous grants. We also receive LOIs, letters of intent, from organizations that do want to participate in that year's grant process, and evaluate those and accept or reject those. Then as we get into summer, July, we get all the applications. They're due July 15th, generally speaking. And then late summer is where we really do all the heavy work. So what's unique about what we do is all our board members are assigned as liaisons for all the organizations that apply. And so they spend a lot of time with the organizations doing things like site visits, getting to know the organization, and getting to understand the grant. Then we meet, we've got 4 cohorts that are divided by category. We discuss each of the grants and we make recommendations to the board. And in September, we meet as a board and approve the grants. And then in October, we have fun by giving out the grants and having a nice reception. And take a little time off in January, start it all over again.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, well, you could see in 2024, we made a lot of grants. We have 65 grantees. And we totaled our grants this year at $873,075. That is the largest dollar amount we've ever awarded, and it's $88,250 more than last year, which is about an 11% increase. We also awarded 2 more grants this year than last year. We actually, I think, also had 2 additional applications than we had last year. As you're aware, $300,000 of the total was funded by the city's generous grant to the foundation. We are very grateful to all of you and city staff for recognizing the ongoing needs in our community and for your commitment to addressing them, and deeply appreciate your trust in the foundation as the fiduciary for the city funds to distribute to the nonprofits. So thank you again. While I won't go through all the list, you can see that. They are many and very varied. We have from the youngest to the oldest in our community. We have individuals, families, those facing food insecurity, children, adults struggling with mental health issues and disabilities, victims of domestic violence, cultural institutions, and so much more. These grants, as Eric said, were distributed on October 30th at the Arts Center, and it was a very, very joyful event. Okay.
So you can see the breakdown by category. I won't get into much detail unless there are questions on this, but basically the categories are more driven from a bottoms-up approach than a tops-down approach, from the perspective of each organization applies based on what their needs are, what their requirements are, and we evaluate from that perspective and then award on that basis rather than sort of allocating from a top-down perspective. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and the percentages don't change all that much because I think the needs are pretty consistent year to year in terms of the different categories. I also want to just take a moment because, as you know, we had a recovery fund, and there will be a change to that for the next coming year. Thank you. After we closed the Highland Park Shooting Response Fund, we established the Recovery Fund, which was enacted to provide grants to nonprofits addressing the ongoing needs of victims and the broader community impacted by the shooting. In 2023, we distributed $367,000 to the nonprofits to support those needs. This year, we distributed $127,500, some of which the donations came from some of the community activities that supported this recovery fund, like the turkey trot, the 5K race, the half marathon, Rock the Ride, all of which supported this recovery fund. While it's continued this year, the numbers have dwindled in terms of the donations, and it just doesn't seem possible to sustain a dedicated recovery fund. So what we decided to do for 2025, because there still are victims, and this isn't something that's going to go away in the very short term, we're going to integrate the funds that still remain, which we'll know by the end of this month, into our annual grant fund process, and then key those monies to the victims who are still struggling. So we'll have the recovery fund through the annual grants process, and there won't be a dedicated recovery fund any longer. Eric?
So a couple initiatives to update you on. We changed our logo this year, and as you know from our agreement with the city that we also support organizations in Highwood as well, and so we wanted to make that clear on our logo so you can see strengthening Highland Park and Highwood since 1992, so that's a change. We also have an initiative called Connecting Commerce with Community, which is a partnership we've got with the Highland Park Chamber of Commerce, with the idea of being strengthening business while also supporting nonprofits in the area, and so that's ongoing. And then aiming high for Highwood again, trying to raise money from some of the Highwood businesses, helping them understand that some of that money goes back into Highwood, and so getting support from them as well.
Okay. Highland Park Community Foundation is here to serve our community today and for generations to come. And we recognize, though, that we can't do this ourselves. We can't serve the community without the assistance that we get, number one, from our city leaders, from the over 60 organizations that do the actual work and provide the vital programs and services to our community, and our extremely generous donors and supporters. We have individuals, we have families, businesses, and foundations. Our Champions programs in the last year or two, spearheaded by Terry, has really grown our base of support tremendously. So we're very proud of that. Thank you for your continued support, and if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. So appreciate, again, all the time and care that I know you put into analyzing each of the agencies and trying to figure out the best and highest needs. So, any questions? Andres? Yep.
This Andres, yeah. Are there any differences trend-wise? I heard you say that the percentages don't change that much, I think by category. But, you know, the recipients or the grant, the candidates seem
Hello?
Yeah. more
We lost you.
knowledgeable of the
All right.
process.
If you could restate your question, because you disappeared on us.
Yeah, I was curious to know if there's any trends just in the process, where the organization's more organized, more cognizant of the process, same as always. Anything process-wise that is better, worse, same, any trends?
Well, and we could both answer the question. I think that the organizations are getting better at defining what they need, and we're getting better at analyzing the quality of the type of programming that they ask us to support. I don't think, it's changed a lot because we had COVID, which had such incredible needs in certain specific areas, and then we had the shooting, and that really created an onslaught of mental health needs that we're still grappling with today. So maybe if there is a change in percentage, it would be in those categories just because of events that are outside of our community, but or outside of the norm of what needs would be.
But still a lot of bread and butter
Yeah.
needs that are ongoing, and, people don't necessarily realize all the needs that are in our community.
Right.
And so, but fortunately, we've got a lot of great organizations that work to support the community in those ways, and so we're always happy to support those groups.
Great. Kim?
Thanks. I just want to thank you. I was on the board of the Community Foundation like 20 years ago, and you have made things so much more professional and pulled together to make it easier. The applications, for the applicants, have a one-stop shop so that these places are not spending their time applying, but are actually taking the money and using it for what we want it used for, to support the community. So thank you for making it such a great organization.
And I do want to make a special thank you to Terry, because she has been instrumental in building that kind of organization that you just described. Amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It is a team effort. It is. Board members spend so much time, so much good time put into it, and the awareness. And the other thing, this isn't obviously dollars, but we hear so much now from our grantees about how they are working together. And truly,
Maybe hang it up. There we go.
the greatest joy we get is knowing the difference that we are making in the community.
Right.
But knowing how much now the grant recipients are networking, are collaborating, that's also tremendous. You just take joy in it because you know that they're helping each other.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yumi?
I also want to say thank you to all of you. I mean, the three of you here in the room, all of you on the screen. Yeah, and I also think about how, the size of the grants are just really, I think, impactful for the organizations. They're not little, tiny grants. They're ones that are really making a difference.
And some
Yeah.
are. Some are smaller grants, but that's what they need.
Yeah. And it is a true team effort, like every name on that board contributes, so it's, especially when it comes to the grant process, there's so many people that are, carrying the load and doing their part. It really is, it makes it fun, it's a labor of love, and everybody really puts a lot of effort in, and everybody contributes. There's no dead weight on the board.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've done recently is our Associate Leadership Council, which is our junior board, has started participating with us in the grant-making process. And we love it because it really gives them an opportunity to be part of the meat and potatoes of what we do, which is give the grants. And it's our future. It's the future of the community foundation. So that's been a really great stride on our part to get them involved.
Great.
Yes.
Terrific. Yes, Annette?
Sorry, just a quick sort of structural question, because I've seen such wonderful carry through, and I guess my question to you is, on your advisory council, what's the average tenure of people? Because it seems to be incredibly stable, and is that what you would chalk up to the success? Because I think when, in working with your grantees, you develop a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think all through the board, we've got, people with a lot of tenure. So the advisory council are some people that have served on the board and now as advisors. But, I think there's so many good relationships built up through all the people on that board throughout the community that it helps with the stability and the communication between all the organizations, because I think everybody knows the organizations that we're working with.
Bruce?
Thank you, and then I just had a quick question kind of to piggyback on that. So how do you recruit to get younger members on? 'Cause I recognize quite a few of the names. So what's the process like if you want to join?
Yeah.
Do you want to join?
Yeah.
We're always looking for good
Yes.
people.
Yeah, it is a process,
Yeah.
and Cookie Cohn is the chairman of our membership committee, and she's been doing this for a very long time, and she still remains extremely enthusiastic. We had an article published, and it was about the ALC, the Associate Leadership Council, and Terry got calls from people who read the article and said, hey, this is great, can I join? And so we would interview them. We still go through a vetting process for that. And we just we just brought on 2 new board members in the last month, which we're very excited about. And in fact, they volunteered yesterday. We were over doing gift wrapping at Gearhead, and they were the 2 of the few board members that showed up. So, a good start.
And no one can say no to Cookie Cone. So-
No, I can't. That is very true. Wonderful. Well, again, thanks so much for coming
You're
this
welcome.
evening and for all the good that you bring to the community.
No, thank you.
Greatly
Thank you very much.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Okay. Our next item is the transit study. Thanks again, Terry.
Thank you, Mayor. Included in the packet is a staff report, which includes a report and recommendation summarizing the work that we've been doing as part of the transit study the last several months. I do want to introduce and recognize our team that has taken the lead on this important project. First, we have our Director of Public Works, Ron Bannon. We have our Assistant Director of Public Works, Annette Cardiff. I'm gonna go over one more. Lee Overholzer is our transit supervisor. And then our consultant team is led by Lissa Sweeney, who is the Director of Transportation and Planning Services for Civil Tech Engineering, and then her colleague Maxwell Kerr-Hackman. So this team has been working diligently the last several months on a comprehensive transit study. So as you know, this is one of many major projects that's reflected in our work plan. And what we wanted to do was bring together our partner agencies to the table to evaluate transit services in and around Highland Park. And so those partner agencies include PACE, Moraine Township, Ride Lake County, and then are looking at our own transit services that we provide. So this was an excellent opportunity to really do a deep dive in terms of what are the transit services that we are currently providing to our community, residents and businesses. When people are not using those services, or first those people that are using the services, where exactly are they going? And then individuals that are not using transit services, what is the rationale for doing that? And so, as you can imagine, just having those different partner agencies at the table, when we take a look at the final stage of this evaluation and we look at recommendations, we can't control what other partner agencies, will do or not do, but we've certainly been working closely with them as we formulate this report and recommendation. Later on during the council meeting, we are going to provide an update as it pertains to PACE's an additional study that they're undertaking as they take a look at transit services for the entire region. But again, we have a detailed report and recommendation that's included in the packet. We have a presentation that we'll go through, and then again, we're looking for your policy feedback as it pertains to those short, medium, and long range goals. And with that, Alyssa.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us here this evening. As Gita mentioned, I am Lissa Sweeney with Civil Tech Engineering, and I'm the Director of Transportation Planning Services. And so Civil Tech was brought on by the city to assist with this transit study. We have been conducting the study over the last 6 months or so. And so these are kind of taking fairly high level data analysis, gathering community feedback, and then providing some high level recommendations. And so this is the agenda of the items that we'll walk through a little bit tonight. We'll provide a study overview. We will go through some existing conditions, so looking at the state of transit, both nationally, regionally, and then in Highland Park, as well as the community engagement methods that we've employed over the last few months, and then get into those recommendations and next steps. So these are also kind of the major sections that are in the report that was provided as well. So just echoing what was mentioned in terms of the study purpose. So really it's considering the overall transportation network, reviewing how transportation is currently being utilized by residents or visitors to the city through data analysis, community input, and then looking what gaps there are as well. So potential users could be looking for in terms of transportation, and then providing some recommendations. So we also wanted to just note that we are looking at the larger context of the study, so integrating with the overall transportation network. We looked at kind of the bicycle pedestrian network as well within the city and regionally. We looked at alignment with other city plans and initiatives, and then also that regional collaboration. So in both reviewing some of these regional plans, as well as coordinating with PACE, Marine Township, and Lake County. This was our study timeline. So we kicked off earlier this summer, and then we completed the existing conditions review. We went out to the community with surveys and with a pop-up meeting. We held a few virtual focus groups, and then we drafted the report. So just kind of taking a step back to see the state of transit nationally and through the region kind of helps to frame transit in the city. So across the country, ridership on public transportation decreased during the COVID pandemic, and as September 2023 has not recovered, and then we recently have even data that's extended a little bit further to fall 2024, and that as well shows us a similar trend where it has not yet recovered. So I think it's around 603 or 613 million on that chart. So it's gone up, I think, 13% since September 2023. This is also further exacerbated by changing commuting habits. So more people working from home, And then it's also complicated, by maintenance of public transportation, and many agencies and cities are facing a financial, a fiscal cliff as the emergency federal assistance expires. And so regionally, it's also a similar trend, but the Chicago urbanized area does lag behind other large urbanized areas a little bit. So as of May 2024, transit ridership is about 64% of pre-pandemic level, compared to a large urbanized area national average of 74%. With that in mind, there are a few initiatives underway regionally to address some of these gaps. And so the PACE revision plan that is underway, and there are some draft concepts that are out there now. Metra has also been making some changes to increase ridership, such as schedule changes and allowing bikes and scooters on rush hour trains. And then there is also the proposed merger of transit agencies. And so this has been proposed by lawmakers in Illinois to address a $730 million funding deficit. And just to note that the potential agencies have expressed opposition to this merger, arguing that it won't improve performance. So then, looking specifically within Highland Park, we looked at PACE and Metro ridership, as well as the Highland Park Connector. The current PACE routes include 471, 472, as well as the Ravinia Shuttle. And as of 2023, ridership on 471, 472 was down about 53% from between 2019 and 2023. And this excludes lost riders from the shuttle bus service that was discontinued in 2020. And so this graph shows the average monthly ridership of those two routes between 2019, 23, and prior to 2020, routes 471 and 472 had multiple buses operating on weekdays during peak travel times, but service was scaled back during the pandemic with later morning start times, earlier end times, shorter service days. And there has not been a return to the former service level, as ridership has been, again, slow to return. And the Ravinia Shuttle has also seen a 50% reduction in ridership, but venue programming also likely plays a large role in these figures, as the capacity thresholds at Ravinia have been reduced. In July 2024, a note as it relates to PACE is that the city began providing insurance for PACE buses used on its routes. And as of right now, the city is working with PACE to finalize the annual agreement, but that's not yet in place. And then speaking of Metra, they've experienced a less drastic decline in ridership. The UP North Line is down 20% from 2019 to 2023. UP Northwest is down 32%. And so the Highland Park Connector, this is funded by the city, provides free bus transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. And it currently runs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 3. It's undergone numerous service changes. So prior to 2020, it did run every day, or ran every weekday. Service was suspended March 2020 to June 2021, and then it resumed 2 days per week in June 2021. In October 23, it was then increased to 3 days. So you can see the monthly ridership on here since 2019, and you can see that it has recovered significantly. The monthly ridership in 2024 is higher than in 2019. And projections show that 2024 yearly ridership is expected to surpass 2019. So within the city, there are both fixed route transit and demand response service that we're reviewing. And this is also kind of how we categorize some of the recommended improvements as well, since they're different kind of models. So the fixed route transit operates on a set schedule with a predetermined route, and this is likely what most people think of when they hear public transportation or transit. And this map shows the current fixed route options in the city. There are, again, benefits, limitations to this type of transportation. It does allow for a high capacity. There's more awareness with signage, seeing buses around. There are predetermined routes, buses or trains. Some limitations, it can't necessarily go exactly where you want it to go. So there's the first and last mile connection problem. It's also difficult to serve diverse needs, and it might not be the most accessible for all community members. On the flip side is the demand response service. And so this requires advanced scheduling by the customer and is a little bit more flexible with the origin and destination. And they're generally geared towards more vulnerable populations. And they require registration to be eligible. And so these are the 4 demand response service options in the city. There's the Moraine Township door-to-door paratransit van, West Deerfield Township Transportation Services, Faith in Action, as well as Ride Lake County. And so you'll see on the map here, it kind of shows the overlay of where these different services serve. And so some of them, right, are kind of countywide, some of them are more specific depending on the specific provider. And so while customers do have to schedule service in advance, the service areas are expansive. They can be dropped off and picked up, dropped off at their desired locations. Again, it's more high impact because it serves that vulnerable population. But it is more costly to run to allow for that flexibility. And then you will see some quotes in here too, and that's specifically from the public survey that we had distributed. So those are from community members. So as part of the study, we also developed a transit propensity index. And so this determines where community members are more likely to utilize public transportation based on a number of factors, primarily from the census. And that includes population density, elderly populations, adolescent population, English speaking ability, disability, poverty, and no vehicle households. So these are all layered on one another to create an index that you see on the within the map. And so the higher the index score, the darker shade indicates where there might be a more transit dependent population. And so this is really just to give us a general idea of where some community members that we would want to serve through public transportation might be located. And also it allowed us to kind of cross-check once we got survey responses where those survey responses were coming from and if that aligned with where the transit-dependent populations and community members might be. So the last item within the existing conditions section is we also looked at job and employment trends. And so we wanted to really understand also the potential transit markets, and part of that is understanding who's coming into the city to work, where they're working, and then where people are leaving Highland Park to work. And so commuting habits, as you imagine, have changed dramatically in recent years. As of 2022, transit use for commuting to work is down nearly 35% compared to 2019, and share of residents working from home more than doubled. But there are recent developments to suggest a resurgence in in-person work. Recent studies indicate that traffic congestion in the Chicago region is up 18% in 2024 from 2019 levels, suggesting that workers returning to work are choosing to drive more. And so with longer commute times, commuters may see transit as a more convenient option. And then the data surrounding jobs, commuting patterns, on here on a typical weekday, according to 2021 data, only about 9% of workers in Highland Park reside in Highland Park, with about 91% coming from other communities and nearly 2,000 low-wage workers commuting to Highland Park from other communities. We also looked at major employers for transit connectivity, so not displayed here, but we looked kind of where those hubs were, and that's mainly in downtown Highland Park, as well as near the hospital, retail areas along US 41, some of the school districts and commercial areas at Skokie and Lakewood Road. So this is all just to kind of set a framework for what the transit market might be, or where people might be trying to go within the city. So in terms of community engagement, we recognize that data can only tell us so much, and so we try to employ a robust outreach strategy to get as much information as we could from the community at large, as well as from more vulnerable populations. And so we released a public survey which had nearly 400 responses. We went to Food Truck Thursday in August, where we spoke with residents. We held 3 focus group sessions, and then we also held a few stakeholder meetings. Just touching on some of the survey results. Again, we received 379 responses. We have a breakdown by age. You'll see that the largest grouping was of those 65 and older, which is also beneficial because that is one of the age groups that we were looking to receive responses from in terms, again, of that kind of transit dependency. You can also see the primary mode of transportation. The highest primary mode by respondents is personal vehicle, driving alone. But you will see that in other modes, so other modes that respondents take is fairly well spread across the board, including public transportation, and then personal vehicle, walking, biking. Survey destinations. Here you see a word cloud. This was more of an open-ended question, and those are the responses that we received. Those that are larger, we received more responses, or we heard it multiple times. The top 5 most referenced locations: downtown Chicago, airports, Ravinia, local malls, and then Highland and surrounding areas. And this one was fairly interesting. So we asked respondents to indicate their use and awareness of transit services in Highland Park. And this helps us to understand how effectively services are being promoted, as well as how frequently they're being used. And so of the fixed route service, respondents were more aware of PACE and Metra. And of those, Metra was the most utilized. And it also suggests that respondents are relatively less aware of the demand response services. And looking at some barriers, so understanding why residents choose other modes of transportation over transit. Really a preference for driving a personal vehicle was the most common response, followed by public transportation does not go where I want it to go, and it only serves a portion of my trip. And you'll see in the top right that really the majority of respondents were open to taking public transportation if some of the barriers could be reduced. So yes and maybe, accounts for about 90% of responses. And then there's a wide spread of how much you'd be willing to spend to get to certain destinations with public transportation. We also had another open-ended question, just asking about other concerns, barriers, ideas for public transportation, and some themes that came up was providing more frequent service, reducing delays, having later, earlier trips for existing routes, and then really providing those additional connections so it doesn't go currently where I need it to go. Safety and accessibility, communication, and environmental considerations also came up. And so this is just kind of reflecting back on the transit propensity index that we had showed earlier. And this is a heat map of where we received survey responses. So this aligns fairly well with the index, and it also is fairly aligned with general density in the city. We held the 3 focus groups. General takeaways was general appreciation for the study and for including these stakeholders early on in the process, and a general lack of awareness of transit options. So as we heard in the survey, not everyone knew all the different services that were available. For some vulnerable populations, the service hours, days don't meet their needs. So weekend, early morning, late night service times. And then there was also discussions about technology barriers. So recognizing that apps or credit card payments can be difficult for some and can be a barrier to taking public transportation. But there was also a general willingness to use public transportation again if some of these barriers were reduced. Okay, so getting into more of the recommendations. So really the analysis and community feedback highlight the diverse needs of Highland Park in the community, indicating that no single solution can really address all of these issues in the public transportation network, and that, you know, there's various approaches that are needed to fill certain gaps. So we developed 6 recommendations, the first of which is developing comprehensive, easy to read materials as part of a transit awareness campaign. And so, again, just acknowledging the lack of awareness of the transit options. This is a low-cost way of addressing this barrier. This could be coordinating with local institutions and stakeholders to distribute materials, potentially creating like an on-the-road presentation or workshop at certain locations throughout the city. The library, for example, during one of our focus group meetings expressed that they would like to be a transportation information center or hub, so identifying those partners. Then looking at PACE. So PACE implements routing and schedule changes quarterly, and routes 471 and 472 cover the most transit-dependent areas of the city, but they have low ridership. So the goal of this routing changes recommendation would be to reevaluate and improve these routes. And collaborating with PACE can help determine feasible route changes. In the report, I think we give an example of one in terms of restructuring one of the existing routes, potentially to be more circular, to remove a low ridership route that's a little bit further west and connect instead along Green Bay Road. And then also looking at service changes. So public input identified lack of frequency as a major barrier to public transportation use, even more significant than service hours. So recommending an increase in frequency of existing routes. We know that this is subject to funding, but would recommend there be a discussion with PACE as they're going through the revision plan to make some specific recommendations throughout the city. The next recommendation was a tax share rideshare subsidy program. And so this recommendation addresses issues with the existing demand response services that have limited capacity, leading to unmet demand. Community feedback highlighted problems such as low availability, prioritization of medical appointments, and limited destinations. So in this recommendation, residents would register with the city and receive vouchers to subsidize taxi or rideshare fees. Agreements with taxi and rideshare companies allow vouchers to be used for payment, and then participants are responsible for booking their trips. This provides an extensive level of coverage and flexible scheduling that's not available with traditional public transportation. It's also particularly effective at targeting transit-dependent populations, and there are a number of surrounding communities that have employed these types of programs. We also recommended a alternate Highland Park connector route. And so, as you notice from the ridership, that the connector is successful and an important option for seniors and people with disabilities. Community feedback, though, suggests that some residents cannot access the connector due to routing and current ridership. Current riders access desire to more destinations. And so an alternate route could expand service coverage to new community members and serve more destinations. This would likely mean a higher cost to the city. Ways to offset this could include implementation of a modest fare or arranging partial funding from senior centers or other facilities that are served by the connector. Then we have the Ravinia and Downtown Circulator. So this is a seasonal bus or trolley type service that connects downtown with the Ravinia Business District, targeting the highest concentration of jobs and trip generating destinations in the city. It aims to reduce the need for personal vehicles and promotes economic activity by enabling shoppers, visitors, and workers to more easily access downtown. And lastly, dial-a-ride service. So partnering with PACE, the city is able to establish a custom designed demand response service. The city staff and PACE would determine fare structure, geographic boundaries, and passenger eligibility requirements, and this might work well for more of the low density areas of the city. So what we then looked at were the overall goals of the study, as well as community feedback that we obtained to then develop some evaluation criteria to assess the potential transit recommendations. And so these criteria were intended to help the city prioritize projects and initiatives that would best serve the needs of the current and potential transit users with available resources. So this includes those that are low cost, those that are easier to implement, improving access for transit-dependent populations, enhancing regional connectivity, improving service frequency, increasing transit network awareness, and connecting to key destinations. And so with that, we evaluated the recommendations, and you'll see here that different recommendations and programs serve different needs, which is why we've essentially included all of these in the recommendations, and then have prioritized them. And so you'll see, for example, the taxi subsidy program. That one, it looks like it might meet the criteria to the best degree, in that it improves access for transit-dependent populations, connects to destinations, regional connectivity, and is, moderately low cost to implement, as well as, moderate ease of implementation. And so with that, we have taken all these recommendations, incorporated the results from the kind of evaluation table and matrix that you just saw, and then have recommended them into a few different buckets for implementation. We have short term that's less than a year, medium that's 1 to 3, long term that's more than 3, and these are just, again, kind of a high level first pass at the recommended implementation phasing. And so this would be, in the short term, developing that transit awareness campaign and having a discussion with PACE. So providing those routing and service recommendations, especially now as they go through the revision process, and then continuing discussions with those key stakeholders that we initiated discussions with during the study. And then in the medium term, developing and launching the taxi and rideshare subsidy pilot, reviewing, developing and launching the connector alternate route, exploring the circulator, and then also evaluating the taxi and rideshare subsidy program, potentially, in the 3-year or so time frame, establishing a dial-a-ride service. And then more long-term would be evaluating that connector pilot program, and the dial-a-ride service. I believe also in the report, there's another long-term that's also developing and distributing a transit survey. And so that's similar to what we did here, just making sure that we're continuing to meet the needs of the community and that the programs that are being implemented are, in fact, satisfying those needs, filling those gaps. And so that would be also every 3 to 5 years. And this is just a refresher on the overall timeline and bringing us to the final report at the end of the year. And so that was a lot of information, but hopefully this was helpful to walk through it a little bit more in addition to providing the report and then with the packet. And we are happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. As the Lake County rep for CMAP, I'm delighted that you mentioned the part, and I'm panicked over what's coming down the pike in the next year and a half. So thank you for all of this information. If we can't get out of town, at least we can get around within town. I totally agree with the communication piece, and that was like the data point that totally jumped out was the number of people who weren't aware of the Highland Park Connector. It was like, holy moly, that's a lot of opportunity missed. But I have some question about delaying the expanding of the footprint of the connector, only because we've heard from so many people that they're really looking for, and maybe this is just anecdote and not data driven, but the north-south aspect of it, that, you know, you have a lot of people who are right in the downtown area, and of course they're gonna use it if it's right in the downtown area, taking you downtown. So it felt kind of chicken and eggy, and maybe that's a wrong assessment of, in my estimation of where I'm understanding things. Another area where I've heard from several people is young adults with developmental disabilities having access to transit. And I'm not sure if you were able to get into that nuance in terms of people with disabilities versus that specific cohort, but I know there was an interest in having a broader conversation around that. So do you have any insights into those users, or is that too small of a subgroup?
Sure, yeah, so we did within our focus groups have a discussion with a few different organizations. So there was, I believe, a mental health provider, as well as it was the community celebrity
CCHI?
community. Yeah. And I mean, I would say with that, the taxi and rideshare subsidy pilot seems to fit a need of, you can determine who receives that subsidy, and so it's typically been provided, or what we've seen in other communities is that it's provided to seniors or those with disabilities, but that it has a fairly high usage, so that could be an opportunity. But I think that would be a great idea for, again, continuing the discussions, to talk to maybe if there are specific organizations, talk through these recommendations and see if that would meet their needs.
Especially if CCHI is across from the police station, and then we have Keshet just up the road, and then the metro station just further up. That seems like a possibility of something. And then, Gita, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but do we have increased funding in our next year's budget for transit, or is this more of a long?
We don't, and that's why you can see the medium term, right, and have the cost factor associated to it. So the idea would be to, in the next year, do everything in terms of the short-term bullet points, and then longer term, we can budget and then coordinate and plan it.
Right, okay, great. Thank you, though, for an unbelievably comprehensive study. Great job, everybody who worked on this. Really, really appreciate it, because there are so many factors. So you made it really digestible. Thank you. Kim?
Thanks. So I was gonna mention that taxi ride share program as well, and the possibility of using that for certain populations. This is really an important element. I would hope that there might be some funding source outside the city as well that could assist with that, and I know you listed that towards the end of the presentation that we got in the packet. Although, you know, I don't know the status of any of those grant opportunities, but hopefully there'll be something. Then I've got some really specific things. There's with the bus route changes that you're recommending, you recommended eliminating the 41 and Park Avenue stop on the bus route. I know that that serves Target, and it's really important for those who are dependent on the bus to get to work. So there may be a more efficient way to get people there with other route modifications, but I'd wanna make sure that we're serving that population, because there are people riding that bus that need to get to Target. So maybe only certain buses make that stop, depending on their work schedules or something like that. But I just wanted to flag that. And then the downtown and Ravinia circulator idea, we had discussed this with Pace before the pandemic, if you recall that, the meeting with Pace. And they were definitely amenable to this and to having those Ravinia buses provide transportation into downtown Highland Park. It would be useful for Food Truck Thursdays to get people there as well as to Ravinia. The buses are running anyway, and this may be helpful in the short term in terms of getting people used to using the bus. And then maybe they would use it for other things as well. We could use this also for transporting people to do like a multi-location event. Maybe there's something going on in downtown Highland Park and also something going on in Ravinia. So I think this is a great idea.
Just one clarification, I mean, I don't know if the intent was to take the actual Ravinia buses to circulate, because that's where Ravinia had a
They pay for
concern,
it.
as well as
They
Pace had
pay
a
for it.
concern. Yeah, they wanted just point A to point B, Ravinia to the parking was kind of where everyone felt that was most appropriate. But the circulator idea is outside of that, looking at a downtown circulator to expose the downtown district and other areas.
Well, Pace did offer to use the buses going from Ravinia back into downtown because those are running empty.
Oh, for sure, in terms of
So,
like the reverse,
yeah.
absolutely, but not circulating around the
No, no, no.
downtown.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but the
Okay,
others-
yeah, we wanna make
yeah.
sure we're on the same. There was a request to say, well, can you take the Ravinia Pace buses and like do
No,
a
no.
loop, just so we expose people to what's
No,
downtown?
no, that wasn't what I
Yeah.
meant.
Okay.
It was the reverse.
Absolutely,
They didn't
yes.
explain it well, yeah.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, because that was something they were agreeable to a few years ago, so worth asking again.
Any other questions? Annette? No?
Tons.
Tons, okay.
So we picked up the insurance piece of the Pace bus. What's the cost with that?
Significant.
Well, that's,
But
I
they're-
mean,
And that was, they weren't going to renew, as I recall, they were not gonna renew the.
Right, so we're still, we do not have an up-to-date agreement, obviously, because it would eventually be before you for formal consideration. And so Pace initially had indicated they need us to cover the insurance, they would reimburse us.
but that reimbursement hasn't come yet.
Not in the last period, correct.
And
Yes.
is there any anticipation that we may be getting that in the future? I know you're in the process of negotiating, and I think this is great, because obviously we want to stress to them, because we know best where we want them to go.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because in comparing our various options, to me, these are all wonderful things, but I think we need to kind of hone in, and a lot of that has to do with cost, on which options we really recommend, and in
Basically, a
weighing
cost
it.
benefit analysis, right,
Yes.
to see how many people you can help.
And so if we're paying, for example, for the connector, okay, and we find out that how many buses do we have on the connector?
One bus.
One
yeah,
bus.
one bus.
So if that is doing a
And
full
that's our
route,
bus.
that's our
That's
bus.
housed at Public
So
Works.
we're paying
and driven
insurance
by
for it
a-
anyhow,
Well, that's driven by a city employee.
right? A City of Highland Park employee, right? I'm just double checking, in terms of cost. So we're paying insurance on that, we're paying for the driver, and we already have the fixed cost of having the bus there, the connector,
Right,
correct?
but that's a separate bus that's only going to like Jewel, Target.
Yeah, it has limited hours of
Piers.
operation and then
Eh,
set.
Well,
If
I
you look
guess
at the route,
what I'm saying is, one of the options, if the cost is so high with Pace in terms of insurance, one of the options would be to expand the connector's hours and the usage and the stops, and to see what that cost would be relative to the insurance. So we could actually provide for our residents the kind of frequency and access that they want, but I don't know the numbers.
Yes, I mean, that's.
So I'm
it's a
asking
much
that.
smaller bus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you've seen it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
The
It's a
PACE system, so if we are not able to reach agreement, or if PACE just says we're done paying.
We're nixing,
Right.
right. We're down
we-
53%
We will
in
be
big
coming
years.
back to a committee of the whole, because we do not have it in the budget, and it's not financially sustainable for the city to continue that operation.
Right.
So we would have to revisit the
The PACE
overall
insurance.
PACE the
Yeah.
overall PACE operation
For Ravinia.
for everything,
For
all of
everything.
PACE operations, because right now, we operate the PACE transit system, and they reimburse us, well, what they're supposed to do is reimburse us 100% of the cost. If that completely goes away, and we've talked to Ravinia Festival and gave them preliminary indication that we still do not have an agreement with PACE, and so we do need to start looking at plans for 25 if there is not a PACE bus system that would operate to serve them. That is an important element. That's gonna be a separate policy conversation. One, to either bring an agreement for you for approval, or two, to say, PACE is not interested in working
not
with
an
us
option.
as they've been doing for the last 40 years, and so we need to revisit, that whole operation. But I think all the other work is still important and will be done regardless. So looking at the ride share and the connector program and all of that, because that does serve almost like a unique population in terms of the work that that's doing.
So do you want recommendations from us, or do you want to just kind of, so I agree with Councilmember Stone completely. I think that the taxi ride share or the voucher system, so that we help people who may be having technological problems or issues, or maybe they have to go somewhere right away and they either don't have the money right there, or they have no one to assist them with their phone in order to pay for it, and they're get unnerved.
Right.
So if you purchase ahead of time a voucher, so really it's just about your arrangement and getting from point A to point B, it seems like some of our neighboring communities are doing that. And it certainly for certain economic levels, the $5 rate seemed to be pretty consistent in there. And perhaps we have a two-tiered system where some people can use a voucher at a reduced rate and others would pay a full price, but almost like an Uber system where we are helping people
With a
to
cap.
access it
Yeah.
with a cap. And certainly people who need the financial assistance. So that was really my number one choice. I just feel like if we already own the one connector, and I know it's small, and but depending on what the PACE thing is, we might need to consider a second connector, only because then we could still provide the service to our residents instead of being dependent on something that's extremely costly. And I would like to see those numbers
Oh, sure.
in terms of
Look at
PACE,
it, please.
because when I was doing this, I knew about this problem, but I couldn't really assess,
The
well then,
cost
what,
of that,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think, so PACE insurance and then PACE insurance and how many buses. So those were my main questions. I think I had one more, if you'll give me 1 second. Well, move on, I'm sorry, I don't want
Okay.
to
Do you
take up
mean,
other
did you have
people's time.
something you wanted to say?
Mine was really, I mean, I agree with what's been said by my two council colleagues. It was sort of a general question of why other metropolitan areas, why Chicago has lagged. Is it because other metropolitan areas have better offerings? I mean, better connectivity? What, do we know why Chicago has lagged behind other major metropolitan
Yeah.
areas?
That's a really good question. I don't
How
know
much time do you
specifically
have?
why.
I was just gonna say, who cares about
I mean, I
Chicago?
didn't know if there was like some consensus about
Yeah.
why that's happened.
I think it has to do with the number of transit agencies that we have here, and that they're not unified under one umbrella, which of course the transit agencies are upset about.
Yeah.
And there's more to that,
That's,
right?
but that's the
It's about
controversial view.
Scale as well. Really Chicago, New York, and Washington DC are kind of on their own. New York has rebounded, it's very dense, people still travel. LA is bus heavy, people are still using buses. CTA bus has rebounded significantly, but the rail has not. So I would say that Chicago is sort of is unique in that there's great socioeconomic segregation in the city, and those working from home aren't taking public transit.
Thank you.
Marissa?
Just a few quick comments. I agree that the awareness for these programs is number one, because it was amazing when it was already mentioned that how many people are not aware of these programs. Social media and getting just a word out, not necessarily social media, but all different forms to get that out, the message out, so people will take advantage of these programs. And then what's already been said about the taxi rideshare subsidy pilot, I think I'm definitely in favor of that. And I had heard that it's going on in Deerfield, and it's a big success there. So I would say that program as well. And everything else in terms of the medium-term recommendations look great to me. Maybe exploring additional drop-offs in the surrounding, like Northbrook Court or some of these other places that were mentioned, Highwood that was mentioned, for drop-offs and pickups as well. But thank you for the presentation.
Okay, Tony, anything on that? No? Okay, Andres?
Yeah, a couple questions. With the short, medium, and long-term solutions, and I know you did use different criteria to determine that. If we were to do most of that, do you have any sense of how much of a gap we would be able to address? And I know that might be a little hard, but you feel like we'll get us halfway there, 3/4 there. What is the gap there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I don't think we know the full extent of the gap, but with that being said, I think if you were to accomplish or implement all of these, I think that would cover vulnerable populations as well as non-vulnerable, different areas geographically in terms of both downtown as well as, that's one thing that we kind of looked at, like the job hubs. So I think it would cover those. I think part of that it's dependent on pace too. And that's one of the pieces with, for example, the connector. If there's an alternate route that's pursued, as of now, the connector only serves those with disabilities or seniors, and so there would, if PACE was discontinued, there'd be a gap for people without, I guess other users. So that would be the one consideration I'd say, is that some of it hinges on communications and conversations with PACE. But otherwise, I'd say that this is fairly comprehensive. The one avenue that we didn't review in detail was, for example, like Metra frequency or Metra service hours. We looked at more connectivity to Metra. So I'd say that would be an area for further exploration if of interest too.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, which is your greatest worry? It's a good plan, right? Given that if you did it all, we would narrow the gap quite a bit. But if you look at that list, where is it that you feel that this one might be the most difficult, or the least likely, the most expensive? And which one are you most worried about us not being able to possibly address?
I would say PACE again. That it's just not directly, it's not directly in the control, and then there's also the financial component.
Yumi?
I just had a comment that I wished I had added to my other comments. Thank you for, thank you all for this very comprehensive look. I really appreciated it.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you so much, and lots to discuss going forward, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
You gave us a
thank you.
great foundation for decision-making, appreciate it. Do you want to do any of the closed session? I don't know when dinner comes, what are your thoughts?
We have 20 minutes.
Dinner's in 20 minutes, so why don't I ask for a motion to go into closed? Is that okay, Steve?
Yes, okay.
All right, Tony, take it away. Litigation, purchase or lease of property.
Move to go into closed session to discuss litigation and the purchase or lease of property pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C11 and 5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk call the vote?
Sorry, who was the second?
Kim Stone.
Councilmember Brockman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ross.
Aye.
Councilmember Tapia.
Yes, right?
Councilmember Lidor.
Aye.
Councilmember Stahl.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Mayor Rotary.
Aye.